Okay, I'll call this January 19th, 2022 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission to order. First item on our agenda tonight is the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America,
to the
to
republic,
the republic which stands
one
one
nation,
nation under God, indivisible,
with liberty.
with liberty and
liberty,
justice
justice
for all.
for
Love that. All right, Ms. Lowell, you call the roll.
Chairman Sema,
Here.
Mayor Ring,
Here.
Alderman Whitmire,
Laura, he just sent an email saying he's having an error with the code, so I'll check yes on that one.
okay, thank you. Mr. Bolazina,
I am here.
Mr. McKnight,
Here.
Mr. Malin Smith,
Here.
Ms. Miller,
Here.
Ms. Munzel,
Here.
Dr. O'Mell,
Here.
and Mr. White.
yeah,
For the time being, I have Alderman Whitmire as absent. We have a quorum.
Okay, next is the approval of the minutes from our December 15th, 2021 meeting. Do I have a motion?
Move.
second,
Mel, seconded by Mr. White. Any discussion or amendments on the minutes from the last meeting? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion appears to carry unanimous. Mr. McKnight. You're muted. There you go.
I would actually like to make a motion with people here, with residents here looking to go through business and potentially the zoning code amendment not being of the highest interest and more reason for discuss. I move that we move item 1 to behind item 5 in today's agenda.
Second.
All right. Seconded by Dr. O'Mell. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion appears to carry unanimously. All right, we'll move on to item number 2 under new business tonight. Item number 2 is an amended final site development plan. A request has been made by George Stock of Stock and Associates on behalf of RPT Realty owner for approval of an amended final site development plan for Town and Country Crossing located at 1000-1272 Town and Country Crossing Drive, commercial planned mixed use CPMX zoning district. We will have a public hearing. First matter before us tonight is for the commission to decide the proposed amendment is significant if a public hearing is required. Do I have a motion on that topic?
Motion that it is significant.
Mr. Bolazina, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McKnight. Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion appears to carry unanimously. I now open the public hearing. Mr. Spencer, are there any exhibits?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, staff would like to enter the following exhibits. 1, the municipal code. 2, the comprehensive plan. 3, the development office file is amended from time to time, including staff report titled Town and Country Crossing. 3rd amended final site development plan. 4, the amended final site development plan titled Town and Country Crossing. 3rd amended site development plan dated 12/22/21, prepared by Stock and Associates, Inc. 5, a mailing list, notice of public hearing, and 6, a notice of public hearing posted on the property and published in the St. Louis County.
Spencer, I'll call for our presenter. Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Mayor Reams. For the record, my name is George Stock. I'm with Stock and Associates Consulting Engineers. My address is 257 Chesterfield Business Parkway. I'm here this evening on behalf of RPT Realty, owner of the Town and Country Crossing, and we are requesting your consideration for approval of the 3rd amended final site development plan. The purpose of this request is to accommodate a building addition of 1,360 square feet to what is known as Building H. at Town and Country Crossing. Joining me this evening is Mr. Anthony Gambino, Mr. John Friel, Mr. David Ortner, all with RPT Realty, the owner, as well as Mr. Michael Chiodini with Chiodini Architects. Madam Laura, are you okay if I share my screen at this point?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, before you is the submission documents. I believe all the commission has a copy of this. As I mentioned a moment ago, this is the third amended final site development plan to accommodate Building H addition of 1,360 square feet. I know Mr. Spencer had a nice summary narrative of the history of this development, but the original final site development plan was recorded on March the 3rd. It was recorded on March 1st, 2007. There was an amended final site development plan that was approved and recorded on May 5th or May 20th, 2013. And then a second amended final site development plan was recorded on December the 8th, 2021. That amended development plan was actually approved by the City of Town and Country in 2015 or 2016. Unfortunately, those milers were lost and were retrieved and executed and finally recorded. So that's the history of the development plans. This is the overall campus. And when I refer to it as a campus, you all remember it's 75 acres total, of which 30 acres were split off for the residential development to the west. And then the retail component, mixed use, is the 45 remaining acres. And really what we're focused on this evening is Building H in the northeast quadrant, and a building of addition of 1,360 square feet that would be put on the east end, actually widening the building, increasing its size towards the first watch, which is within the space identified as G. So I'll skip some of these drawings. I know that you've seen them all in your packet, and just kind of go to a color drawing that a little bit better illustration. So these are the architectural elevations as prepared by Chiodini and Associates. So the top left is the north elevation. So if you're out on the patio and your back is to Clayton Road, this would be looking south. And you see in the upper left corner, basically where the existing component is, and then the addition, which is shown to the left. The elevation below that is the east elevation. That would be your back towards the first watch, looking to the west. And you see the building addition includes a lot of glazing, at least on the northern half, and then an accessible door on the southeast corner. That door is basically there. It's just being brought out with the expansion. And then finally, the view from the parking lot looking to the north, the existing building to the left, and the building addition to the right. In plan view, this shows the space, the Chase Bank space. So the red line demarcates the existing building where they will be occupying, and then the additional space as it continues to the east. So a little bit about what's going on in there. Obviously, you're all very familiar with it, the plaza and the signage that spans the Building H and the Building G. So basically, the medallion paver that's centered will be shifted to the east to center on a new walkway that'll be 20 feet wide, north to south, out to the lake. The new paver design would be commensurate with the pavement pattern that's out there today. The sign that spans would be relocated in order to be centered between the two buildings, and the accessible walk would be modified accordingly. So that's the sign modification, relocation being shown there. And with that, that completes our presentation, and I or other members of the team are here to answer any questions the commission or the mayor may have relative to our request. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Stock. Questions from the commission? Mr. Bolzino.
Yeah, as discussed in the staff meeting, a little bit of history. I guess most people know the history, but this property was originally in, a building was constructed under St. Louis County rules, and it was a large, pretty much industrial building for Western Electric that became Lucent Technology, and that had much more square footage than we ended up with in the shopping center. So it was the subject of a lot of negotiation, and it was a very important project for the city. And a lot of thought went into the original plan, and a lot of give and take was made to make that original plan something that Town and Country wanted. Some concessions were made, and everyone agreed at that time what we should have in that development. Originally, there was no more than 309,827 square feet allowed for the commercial development. This approval, even though we had some in the past, will bring it up to 321,618 square feet. To me, a significant difference from the original phase drawings. So, as I said before, but I'll make for the public record, there was much discussion back then about trails in our city, and a very deliberate intent was made to have a trail system that went around this development. Sidewalks were ensured to be all around this development. And then the architect at the time spoke of the ability to have trails within this development and to engage or allow the city, the people of the city, to engage this property in a pedestrian manner through trails that go to amenity features that were part of this development. It was a very, very important aspect. In the original application, the applicant identified special features of the plan. One of the features was the water feature that will create a focus for the development with shops to the south facing onto broad pedestrian ways and patios adjacent to the lake. Another stated goal was the construction of the 5-foot wide concrete trails, as I mentioned, along the entire Clayton Road and Woods Mill frontages, connecting to existing off-site sidewalks, and sidewalks will be constructed through the commercial development around the water feature and leading to shops, clusters, and patios. So as you can see, the original plan really was attempting to encourage a highly active pedestrian activity. The opening between the building F and G had a specific design intent at the time. If you look at the color rendering that the applicant had up recently, the original opening led to a semicircular feature that's an overlook and gathering place that overlooks the lake. It was very much an intent for that design feature and that wide opening to be something that would encourage people to penetrate the block of walls and get to the promenade and use the lake feature. This development pinches that off. So we eroded the original design intent of the promenade once before when we allowed the restaurant on the end cap to usurp promenade space for outside dining. I was opposed to that. And again, it's another item that has reduced and diminished the original concepts that were brought forth and what this city approved as an overall concept for this development. So to the extent that I think it diminishes the public amenities that were built into this original plan, I'm opposed to usurping any more open space in this plan.
Thank you, Mr. Bolzina. Further questions or discussion from the commission? Mr. McKnight?
I had two items I wanted to bring up around this that are concerns to me. First and foremost, when I look at that lake, and when I remember we built this originally, this was to me, the lake feature was designed to bring people in and have a space for them to meet coming into and out of restaurants as I was looking at it. Because originally there were several restaurants along the lake there. And I don't think a banking function gives the same interaction that I would expect there. So I think that's one concern, is I think we are, with development like this and with tenants focused more on the business aspect as opposed to the retail aspect. I'm concerned that this takes away from the design of what this was supposed to be when we built it. And the second question I bring up, and I think this is probably more a conversation for the alderman, but I want to make sure it's on the record. This development is really designed around retail. And one of the features that retail brings in is sales tax and revenue for the city. I'm not sure that a bank would provide the same revenue that a retail space in this area would be. So those are two concerns I have with this design. And I follow on to Commissioner Bolazina's point about pinching off that lake access and making it seem like a hallway as opposed to an access way in. So those are the 2 points I wanted to bring up.
Mr. Mellon Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also share exactly the concerns that Commissioner Bolazina raised from an aesthetic standpoint, as well as the intent concern that Commissioner McKnight raised. And I'll address my concerns with slightly different words. I believe that Town and Country Crossings is an asset to our city, principally for use by our residents and visitors to this city. And the proposal does nothing to add to the shopping or dining conveniences and the shopping and dining amenities provided in that plaza. It's a bank, and importantly, it would be the 6th such bank within immediacy of that intersection. And so I'm questioning whether this addition is complementary to the intent of that shopping center. If I were a retail resident of the center, I think I'd also be concerned, because to me, a bank doesn't generate the attention, the interest, or the foot traffic that a traditional retailer could generate in that space. Unfortunately, Menchie's was not successful, and I regret that. But that does not mean that another retailer could not be successful in that space. So I net out saying this doesn't add to the intent of that center or add any advantages or resources or conveniences or services to the general community.
Thank you, Mr. Mellon Smith. Further discussion for the commission? Mayor Ream? You're muted, sir.
Yeah, I don't disagree with those comments, but I would say that, like most people in Town and Country, I eat at Cooper's Hawk fairly often, went to Menchie's. I love First Watch, Napoli too. And so I spent some time walking the promenade, and I will say that in general, I don't see it being used much, and I will admit my data is anecdotal just from the times that I'm there, but I've been there a lot of times in good weather. And if our intention is to have people congregate and meet on that promenade by the lake, it would seem to me that we need to do a little more to make that happen, because I see people, maybe they'll go outside of Qdoba's and eat and leave, or they'll eat at First Watch and maybe walk out for a second and leave. So I think the intent for what we're trying to do has probably not been as successful as we would have liked. And again, I would admit strictly anecdotal when I've been there, but I tend to go to those places pretty frequently.
Further question or discussion? Mr. Bolazino?
Not to disagree, but I think we can ensure that the original intent of the promenade and the use of that lakeside area will be totally lost if we keep doing things that turn its back on the lake and do not encourage the use of the promenade.
Ms. Lowell, have we received any public comments or has anyone signed up to speak this evening?
We have received no public comments and nobody has signed up to address the commission.
All right, thank you. Ms. Mueller.
There we go. I just want to echo, I think what the mayor said, and I recognize that there was an original intent to have the promenade be used in a certain way. But I mean, when the weather is in any way conducive to being outside, I have yet to see a day when that patio at Cooper's Hawk wasn't packed with people. I mean, it may have deviated from the original intent, but it has certainly served the city well when it comes to revenue. Really all the restaurants. Napoli too has the same setup back there. So I don't want us to get too hung up. I don't love this use of this part of the center. I've discussed before, this is the, I think, sixth bank is what Mr. Malin Smith said earlier in that area, just that intersection alone. But I think that we're being a little bit, maybe a little precious to say that we think that residents are going to really heavily be using that promenade and that path for just ambling around to enjoy the evening. I mean, part of Town and Country is we all live in an area where we've got plenty of places around where we live right outside our front doors where we can be walking around doing that kind of thing. And if I have my choice between walking around my neighborhood or the parks or something versus going and driving to Town and Country Crossing and then walking around that little lake there, that's not going to be my first choice for that. So while I don't want my comments on that to be misconstrued as an approval or endorsement of this specific project, I just think that we need to be mindful that I don't think we should get too caught up in the use of that area to the detriment of other businesses coming in and other changes. That's all I had to say.
Mr. White.
Yes, I've listened to the various comments made so far, and quite frankly, I can subscribe to all of them, and I am a bit conflicted on this. One of our functions on this commission is to provide amenities for the people of Town and Country. And yes, okay, there's 5 existing banks, but apparently there's a need for a 6th bank in this area. I don't suppose this bank is coming here without doing any research, and they're finding that there is a need for this particular bank to come into the area. I don't say necessarily onto Town and Country Crossings. I mean, they could go over this Clayton Road into that area as well. But there is a need for another bank. On the other hand, I hate to see Town and Country Crossing turning from what I perceive as being its primary function, which is retail, into a business centre. The very next building, of course, is called the Coldwell Banker, which is a business rather than a commercial entity. So I do have some conflicts, and I'm not quite sure which way I'm going to make my vote go at this time, because I do see a real need. On the other hand, I don't want to see this narrowing of the alleyway to the lake area. It might not be used, but certainly won't be used if we restrict the area off altogether.
Thank you, Mr. White. Further discussion? Mr. Bolzina.
Yeah, if we can add anecdotal information, which I guess is not very truthful, but maybe persuasive. I mean, I've used this promenade a lot, and when they used to have little machines there to feed the fish and take the grandchildren and spend the day and go get some pizza and walk around and just have a nice afternoon. So that's just more anecdotal information if you want to add it. Some people use it, some people don't. But I'm getting back to the original design intent. The design intent was try to encourage a social space and have retail functions that would front that social space, that would add to and use the promenade. This bank is not one of those uses that has anything to do with the promenade. The whole concept is just totally inconsistent with the original plan.
Mr. McKnight.
I think along the same lines, it's the challenge to me is this space was a huge compromise that we struck between development and planned retail space. And I look at it, it's this in my mind when this was built, and I remember this as part of the conversation, this was designed as a retail space. And I understand banks sell things and, you know, there are retail banks, but it's not what you'd consider, in my mind, a retail outlet that someone's going to go shopping in. Although banks would probably say they do have shopping and all of those things, it's not a space that I would go to go shopping. And so I look at this space really as, you know, I understand that it's a business, it's commercial, but in the space of this area, it's designed as a retail space for the city. It's designed as a place that you go to shop and to draw people in and to draw it in to support other retailers in that space. I just don't see the function of this being worth the trade-off to lose part of that vision for the property.
Ms. Mueller?
I don't mean to imply that I don't see people using just to make it clear, I don't want to imply that I don't see people using the promenade. I think to the contrary, I do see them using it every time I'm at First Watch, anytime I'm at Qdoba or any of the restaurants there. People are definitely using it. Kids are fishing, you know, the little kids like to go look at it and stuff when people are eating. It's just, I see it, the use is as an offshoot of use of those parcels and what their businesses are, so I think we're actually on the same page in that regard, that, you know, those are uses that are complementary to what we want to see here. So Dennis, I believe you. I believe your anecdote, and because it's a nice thing to enjoy when you're there for the other businesses. But you know, I agree that I don't think of the bank. I mean, unless you're going to go inside and do your banking and leave your 3-year-old out by the big open body of water, I don't really see it being a draw for that use. So, nor would we want to encourage that. So,
Dr. O'Mell?
I don't like a bank being there at all. And it's just a practical question because I know there are vacancies. Seems to me on the other side would be more appropriate. Now, I know that the RPT Realty knows a lot more about shopping centers and so forth, but I don't think we had this in mind, particularly the prime area overlooking the lake. It seems a waste of a choice spot. I just think it's not a good, I don't know how many other potential areas or whether the realty company evaluated other areas and decided they weren't appropriate, but I'd like to hear if there was any discussion.
Mr. Spencer?
Just real quick, Mr. Chairman, I just want to kind of refocus the conversation. Financial institutions are permitted use. There's no limitation on financial institutions. That's a conversation for another meeting, a policy decision. I think what Mr. Bolzina brought up about the pathway and narrowing it and access, those are all site planning issues, which is really what's before you. Good planning practice. I think that's really where the conversation needs to be directed, is the design and the layout and how this addition impacts the center, not necessarily the use of the space, because the use is permitted by right.
Thank you. Good reminder, Mr. Spencer. I see it looks like Mr. Chiodini has his hand up.
Yes. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah, would you state your address for the record, please?
1401 South Brentwood. I am Michael Chiodini, president of Chiodini Architects. Also co-chair of the ARB in the city of Kirkwood. Although we were not the original architects for this center, I think everybody needs to realize that the day and age of retail has changed, not just from the electronic retail, but due to the pandemic, the day and age of restaurants has changed now due to the pandemic. And I agree with Mr. White that, retail centers really are amenities for your citizens, not just in retail, but in other amenities like banks, gyms, grocery stores, and such. I think everybody needs to give RPT a little bit of credit. They had a Steinmart there that went belly up and it was vacant. And now they've brought in a major retailer with REI and Sephora next door, and soon to be another tenant there. You're lucky that this center is as filled as it is. I mean, the unfortunate part about those buildings facing the lakes, they really are not opportunistic spaces for retailers. The visibility is not there from the parking lot. The visibility is unfortunately facing the lake, and the retailers, that's not what they want. They want the visibility from the parking lot. So from that design, it's forced to be on the other side, and the tenants just don't want it. You get the businesses like Gundeker and the bank, which will work fine there. But I think everybody needs to realize, things have changed. Here in the city of Kirkwood, I do everything I can to fill a vacant space, and that's really important to me. And I just hope you guys look at it the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chiodini. Since we didn't have any public comments, I'll declare the public hearing closed. Do I have a motion to recommend approval of the amended final site development plan with conditions as set forth in the staff report to the Board of Aldermen? All right, looks like item number 2 fails to gather motion. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, it may not be a bad idea to see if someone wants to make a motion in the negative as well, since the charge is to make a recommendation to the board. I think ultimately, if no motion is made, I think we've historically inferred that as a negative recommendation, but it'd probably be a good idea to call for one just to see if someone would like to make that motion.
All right, Mr. Bolzino.
So I didn't understand it totally, but are you suggesting that we make a motion to disapprove so that it can go to the board?
Correct. It'll be a motion to recommend disapproval.
Okay, I'll make that motion to disapprove.
Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. Malin Smith. Discussion? Mr. McKnight.
Just one point I wanted to make, and just to be clear on this, I am not, I think Ryan's point about, bank is an approved option here. I absolutely agree that it is, and we should not be arguing about what business goes in here. I think we're being asked to change the design of the layout for something that I don't think fits in the overall view of what we're trying to have the center be. So that's why I would say the bank comes into play. I think if they were going to build something that would enhance this whole environment and make this more like the vision of what we're looking for, it might be something that I would consider. But making an exception for this is not something I feel I'm comfortable with.
Mr. Bolzino.
Yeah, and getting back to Ryan's point, the disapproval is based on our review of the site plan, and the site plan is inconsistent with the original plan that was approved going back to 2007 and going forward. And it does increase the square footage to, again, more than what was approved. And to that extent, it's not consistent and not within keeping of the original concept.
Further discussion? Okay, so we have a motion to disapprove. So a vote yes is to recommend that it disapproval to the Board of Aldermen. So, Ms. Lowell, would you call the roll?
Mr. Bolazina,
Yes.
Dr. O'Mell,
Aye.
Mr. Malin Smith,
Yes.
Mr. White,
nay,
Miss Munzel,
Aye.
Miss Miller,
I think we lost her actually.
We lost. Looks like she dropped.
okay. Where was I? Alderman Whitmire,
He's a no. Thumbs down.
Chairman Seaman,
Yes.
Mr. McKnight,
Say that again, Will. We couldn't hear you.
yes, okay. And Mayor Ream.
Yes.
Okay, the motion carries, sorry, 7-1 or 7-2. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Ms. Lowell. Thank you, Mr. Stock. Next two items on the agenda pertain to 929 Claymark Drive. If there are no objections, we will request the applicant present all the information pertaining to items 3 and 4 together, but we will vote on them separately as they appear on the agenda. Item number 3 is a conditional use permit. A request has been made by Ben Mormon, owner, for approval of a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a pool located at 929 Claymark Drive in the Suburban Estate Zoning District. And item number 4, a conditional use permit. A request has been made by Ben Mormon, owner, for a approval of a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a pool house, also located at 929 Claymark Drive in the Suburban Estate Zoning District. I'll call for our presenter. Please give your name and address for the record.
Sure. My name is Ben Mormon, 929 Claymark Drive.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Mormon. Do you have a presentation for us this evening?
I really don't have a presentation for you. I mean, I think you've all seen the plans, I believe, site plans and drawings.
Yes.
Yeah. So, you know, my family and I built a house here. Well, we've been here just over a year now. And, you know, Town and Country's been great for us. And we'd like to add to our backyard by building a pool and a pool house.
Okay. Questions from the commission?
I'm sorry?
Mr. Mellon Smith.
Thank you. Mr. Mormon, welcome to Town and Country if you're a brand new resident.
Thank you.
The issue on this agenda item is the distance of the pool from the house.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the commission would be helped by understanding your reasoning for locating it where you're proposing it.
Sure. The reason for the location is safety first and foremost. We have 3 young children. It pushes the pool farther away from the house. 2 of my children aren't water safe at all. And this provides an opportunity to create a buffer between the house and the pool.
And the pool itself would be how far from the rear property line?
What is from the rear of the house?
67.
Where are we at here? The exact dimension is from the rear of the house.
Mr. Spencer, did I hear you had an answer to that?
Yeah, Ryan, can you help me out on that, please?
It's 66.9 feet or 67 feet
From the property line?
from edge of pool to the rear property line. And then the side yard, it's about
Right.
51 feet.
51 feet. Yeah. 51 feet on the north side and 58.8 feet on the south side.
Correct.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Further question or discussion from the commission? Mr. White.
well, welcome, and I'm looking forward to having your pool. I didn't see any details of the pool itself in the presentation. I'm not sure if we are needing to discuss that. Of concern, though, would be safety. The city does have quite a few restrictions and requirements for building pools. I assume that you're aware of those,
Oh, well,
particularly
yes.
in terms of fence around the pool
Yeah.
and also an audible alarm, which of course I'm sure you'd love to have, given the age of your children.
Yes, sir.
So you are aware of those.
Yes, sir. Yeah, the yard is already fenced.
Does it meet
It does.
the city requirements for a pool?
Yes, it does. Yes, it was an approved fence by the city.
Is it approved for a pool?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Further question or discussion from the commission?
Chairman, I would just make a point. One of the, the concern, I think that the address, the 30-foot extension from the house rule that we have, I believe we covered in the earlier meeting, just that was there primarily to make sure that any outbuilding would be close enough to the house to be viewed by the property owner and maintained by the property owner to keep it up to speed, keep it up to date, not let it fall down. As I look at this drawing, as I look at this layout, I don't really foresee that being an issue in this this proposal. So I think that the pool house is very visible from his property. It's very visible from what he'll be using it a lot. So I don't see that as being an issue. And that is really the biggest thing we have that we're dealing with here as far as, the distance from the house and from those types of things. So I don't see this as being a real problem for me.
Mr. McKnight. Ms. Lowell, do we have any public comments or have any members of the public signed up to speak on this item?
No, we do not.
Well, just for the record, we have public comments that were submitted.
Submitted in the application, yes.
By the applicants.
Yeah, saw a number of those and quite a bit of support, it seemed like. Further question or discussion? Mr. Malin Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the application is further enhanced and Mr. Mormon should be complimented with the landscaping that is proposed. There is extensive landscaping proposed on 3 sides of the rear yard, which I think makes the application even more attractive, both to their house and to their neighbors.
Further discussion, questions? Do I have a motion on agenda item number 3 to recommend approval of the conditional use permit with conditions as set forth in the staff report to the Board of Aldermen?
So moved.
Motion by Dr. O'Mell. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McKnight. Further discussion? Ms. Lowell, will you call the roll?
Mr. Malin Smith,
Yes.
Ms. Munzel,
Aye.
Mr. White,
Aye.
Chairman Sema,
Aye.
Mayor Ream,
Aye.
Mr. McKnight,
Yes.
Mr. Belazina,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Alderman Whitmire,
Yes.
and Dr. O'Mell.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thanks, Ms. Lowell. And agenda item number 4, the pool house. Is there a motion to recommend approval of conditional use permit with conditions as set forth in the staff report to the Board of Aldermen?
So moved.
Dr. Mel, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ms. Munsell. Further discussion? Ms. Lowell, will you call the roll?
Mr. Belazina,
Yes.
Alderman Whitmire,
Yes.
Mr. McKnight,
Yes.
Mr. White,
Yes.
Chairman Sema,
Aye.
Mayor Reem,
Aye.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
Mr. Malin Smith,
Yes.
Dr. O'Mell,
Aye.
and Ms. Munzel.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mormon.
Thank you.
All right, item number 5 on the agenda tonight, a conditional use permit. A request has been made by Elliot Abbey and Catherine Kiefer, owners, for approval of a conditional use permit for an accessory structure, a detached garage located at 1089 Mason Ridge Road in the Suburban Estate Zoning District. I'll call for our presenter.
Everybody, I'm the architect for Catherine Kiefer and Elliot Abbey. My name is Max Bemberg. I'll be presenting for them tonight.
Could you state your address for the record, Mr. Bemberg?
Sure, it's 5461 Rosa Avenue in St. Louis, Missouri.
Thank you. Do you have a presentation for us this evening?
Sure, I can share my screen now. All right. So I'm sure you've all had time to review the materials, and I guess before I get started, thank you for your time this evening. I appreciate it. So we're located here at the corner of Clayton Road and Mason Ridge. There's an existing house on the site that is located facing south towards Clayton Road, and there's also an existing 3-car garage on the site. It's a goal of the clients and of this project to stay in this home as town and country residents and to age in place in this at this home. And so in order to do that, the existing garage is very difficult to access. It requires coming through the driveway through a porte cochere and then making a 180-degree turn to kind of get into the structure or backing in. So there's a concern there for how to kind of park and age in place in this more successfully, but then also moving some more living space from the second floor down to the first floor and using the existing garage as a habitable space as a part of another portion of this project. So in doing so, that's going to cut off the current access to that current garage. And so we're constructing a new garage here. And as a part of the zoning code through town and country as well, the doors to that garage cannot face a street. So that would the garage doors are pretty much either going to face east or north. And to create a nice courtyard for the property, and then to also align with the front of the existing house, we've detached that garage to allow for both ease of access and also privacy for both the residents and also privacy towards the street. The site is pretty well landscaped with a lot of mature trees around both Clayton Road and Mason Ridge to provide privacy, visual privacy. But the client is also proposing to plant the south and east facades with either wisteria or something to kind of help grow and soften the facade of that garage structure. Let's see. Furthermore, the character of this garage, while still being detached, is trying to kind of respect and emulate the existing home in terms of using similar materials, a wide format, lap siding, as well as 3-bay windows to kind of respond to the existing geometry of that house to blend in its character. So to kind of tie the two together in that way as well. So that is a brief intro into the project.
Thank you, Mr. Bemberg.
Thank you.
Do I have questions or discussion from the commission? Mr. McKnight.
Just a question of the architect, and this is obviously not the ARB, but when you said that the materials of the garage match or designed to match the house, I guess I'm a little confused by that, with the house being predominantly brick and the siding on the garage being just siding. And I'm not sure whether you showed that material to the ARB or what that was, but did they give you feedback on that? I guess I'm a little surprised that they didn't have an issue with that.
Yeah, we did go through ARB and it was passed through that process. To your point, yeah, there is a predominant material of brick on the project, but we were trying to hearken those other materials being the lap siding and also the shingle roofing. So we're kind of calling back to those materials, and the ARB did review these drawings and approve it as presented.
Further questions or discussion? Mr. Malin Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Bemberg, let's revisit the issue that Commissioner McKnight raised. What lap siding on the existing house are you replicating?
I can share my screen again if that would be helpful. There is, pull up some photos here. There's lap siding along the high end of the gables of both this lower volume and also the main volume of the house. So it's about it's a wide format. I can't remember if I think it's a 10-inch, excuse me, lap siding that we're going to respond to. And that's seen on pretty much all 4 elevations. It's even in some small moments here along the Clayton facade, as well as some of the dormers. And then again, on the high end as well. And then on the back side in this larger addition here.
Well, thank you, Mr. Bemberg. Yeah, you're correct in that lap siding is present in the front elevation, but minimally so. Most of the other elevations you're showing are not visible to the front. Was any consideration given to more closely resembling the classical architecture of the home? Primarily considering, for example, brick?
It was not brought up in the ARB process. Yeah, through that process, the conversation was that the detailing of the windows, the gable roof form, and then the presence of that material, while not being brick and not being the primary material, was at least reflective enough to kind of meet the architecture review board's qualifications.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. White.
Along the same lines, the roof material of the existing property, is that slate?
Correct, yes.
But you're going to have a shingle instead.
It'll be slate as well. We'll go back with a slate, and it'll be a composite slate that will match the look and color and style of the existing slate.
Thank you.
Ms. Munsell?
Thank you. Is there a reason that the garage isn't attached? I mean, I understand the desire to have more living space in the existing garage, but is there a reason that the proposed garage would not be attached to that? To the existing garage?
Primarily, are you saying like for
as a side entry just behind the house, basically next to the existing garage? Basically,
you're saying to the north of the existing garage?
Correct, yeah.
Believe that we would.
Oh, correct, yeah.
I believe if we were to locate it there, it would, well, given the approach to the project of enclosing the space between the existing house and the existing garage as a new enclosed volume, the access to that, to the north, to that space wouldn't really work. And then furthermore, I think we'd be pushed up against our setbacks if we were to try to locate it there. So the garage wouldn't really fit in that location.
I guess I'm talking about to the east of the existing garage. If I can orient myself, I can't find the
north arrow is in the bottom. It's a circle with the line. So north is facing up in this plan.
Okay. Yeah, it just seems like there'd be an option to, I mean, again, I'm not, if there was a reason, I guess I'm just inquiring on if all avenues were exhausted to make it attached.
Yeah, I think that, given the existing tree coverage and also there's a kind of an oblong shape, green shape here. There's an existing garden on the site as well. Very nice landscaped garden that we didn't want to disturb. But that the other zoning implication of having the garage doors face either east or north made it so that there'd either be considerable driveway reconfiguring or a lot of cost and kind of not just cost, but complications in terms of existing trees and site access that made this location really the most desirable and one that does still give that privacy to the client or to the owners and without really disturbing too much of the site.
Okay.
Further questions or discussion? Mr. Bolzino.
Yeah, I mean, because it is detached, and you've given some reasons why it would be difficult to detach, but I don't think impossible. I think then we are allowed to have some higher scrutiny over some of the conditions and some of the criteria that we have to decide this, and that is whether it's visually coherent and are visually incompatible. Whether it's visually coherent with the existing use, I don't think it is. I think the choice of materials for the building are not visually coherent with the house. And when we deal with detached structures, as I've said for some other items on the agenda, we are always concerned that they be kept up and maintained the same as the main house. And one way to ensure that is to make them look like the main house and make them as good as the main house. And I think the total absence of any brick on this garage is visually incoherent with the existing house. I don't have the opportunity to see the roof shingle, but I'm going to take your word that it's a suitable match to the slate roof. That's certainly a very nice roof on the existing house. So I'm not in favor of this proposal. It would be nice to have some kind of connection, visual connection to the existing house. If that's not possible, then I would want this detached structure to be as visually coherent with the existing house as possible. And I don't think just making windows and lap siding is enough.
Ms. Mueller?
Am I understanding? I'm looking at it's the second to last page of the packet, 23. Looking at photo 3 or rendering 3, am I understanding that right? Is it being proposed that you'd keep that garage door there?
No, we're going to be infilling that existing garage, one of the existing garage doors, and putting high windows into a bathroom space, and the other garage door is going to be converted into glass French doors.
Okay, but I'm confused. So do you see the part I'm talking about where it looks like the existing garage door has been left there?
It's, I believe so, image 3 on page 23. Yeah, that's going to be the same siding that we were talking about earlier, but with, so it's horizontal siding below and then with solid panel siding above with glass block windows infill into the bathroom spaces there.
Okay, so there would just be like a rectangle of siding that won't be filled with brick. It's going to be an inset of siding with windows above.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, I think that's kind of an odd, I don't know. I think that looks sort of afterthought-ish. That's just my personal opinion. If we're talking about coherence and bringing the whole project together, like Mr. Bolazina said.
Dr. Ramel.
This is, I think, visible from Clayton Road and Mason Ridge. I think it should look pretty much like the house. I'm in agreement with Mr. Bozina. Otherwise, you know, it looks maybe like a shed or it should be coherent. I think that's the word that Mr. Bozina used. It's a coherent. It's going to be visible from both streets. It should look like the house.
Mr. White.
Yes, I endorse what Dr. O'Mell has been saying. I passed this house twice, if not 4 times a day. And quite frankly, I've always thought of it as a delightful house. And I do not think this separated garage fits in with it at all. I'd like to see the delightful house and garage when I see it for the next 10 or 20 years.
Alderman Whitmire.
So I guess the question to the architect, you know that detached garages are not provided for in our code. So you probably discussed this with your client and potentially attaching the garage. Can you tell us a little bit about how that conversation went and why you arrived at the notion of coming forward and requesting a detached garage?
We did look at or to your point, we did look at attaching it structurally. As long as there is some sort of architectural structure that is tying the two volumes together, then it would be, considered attached from an, zoning perspective. So, if there were to be an attachment in this location, seeing as how we are still required to have the garage doors facing away from Clayton or Mason Ridge, then there would be, we've considered, other ways of structurally attaching across this driveway. And, we might need to potentially bring the garage a little bit closer to the house to make that structural attachment work through some sort of trellis or arbor or some kind of archway into that kind of car courtyard space as a way of tying the two volumes together structurally.
And you rejected that because?
Primarily just, again, for that ease of access, and then also to give the two volumes that separation to allow for light and air. And I think it was also just a complexity of cost in tying those two together structurally with a couple beams and some lattice work. This seemed like a more elegant solution. And to the board's comments about character, we did try to pay attention to volume and window openings. I hear what you're saying about the materiality and the bricks, and I think that is something that we can look into. But that was kind of our consideration up to this point.
Thank you.
Further questions, Mr. Bozina?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have a strong reaction to creating a auto court, with this detached building. My stronger reaction is that if you're going to be detached and create this idea of an auto court, then I think it should be totally compatible and consistent with the original house to make it look like this is the way we designed it, and this is the way the original development of the house was, and it makes some sense. Right now, it makes no sense to me to have the siding, this, big, I don't know, one of the commissioners call it a shed. Well, it's a big shed, but, and it's going to be pretty predominant as you go across the front of this house. So anyway, I just reiterating, I just think it's not coherent with the original house, and it should be.
Mayor Ring?
Yeah, just a quick question of Mr. Bemberg. When you went in front of ARB, was it a mixed vote for it, or was it unanimous one where, of approval? I'm just curious as to how that played out when you were at that meeting.
Brian, I think you were there as well. I believe it was unanimous. There was some debate. I don't remember if of the 4 board members, if all 4 voted, or there might have been one who was on the fence, but I can't remember what the final.
4-0. 4-0.
4-0. So yeah, it was unanimous.
Thank you.
We spent more time talking about whether A or B should review it first or P and Z, and I'm already regretting that decision. So,
Is it Miss Valet?
It's it's Ms. Valette. My name's Marilyn Valette, and I am the project manager for MDG Renovations. We're the general contractor on the project.
Would you state your address for the record, please?
Yes, it's 745 Glen Vista Place in Glendale.
Thank you.
I just wanted to reiterate what Max was saying about the detachment of the garage and the client's wishes and intents. And actually, the clients are on this call with us as well. Because of how they want to use the space, having plenty of room to back their cars in and out of the garage. The client has a lot of really nice landscaping that's 20 years old, plants that are 20 years old along that back, I guess the north perimeter that would have to be eliminated or obscured if we did some kind of a connection between the garage and, excuse me, the new garage and the current building. So those were some of the things that factored into the decision, and the client was very happy to have a detached garage. I mean, she understood that we had to go in front of the zoning commission and so forth, and they are with us tonight. But that was kind of their intent, and they were happy with it. Totally understand the comments about the materials, the tie-in of the materials. But the detachment was kind of one of the key points that we were trying to accommodate with the client on this.
Thank you, Ms. Follett.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. McKnight?
Follow on to Commissioner Bolazina's point. I think that I don't necessarily have an objection to the detachment here, but I think the detachment brings us to a conditional use permit, which makes it so that it's important in the zoning aspect of it that these 2 buildings don't look like 2 different buildings on this and have like a small house on the corner and a main house next to it. And then, so that's the challenge I have, is that the 2 buildings look very different to me and they don't look like they're part of one unit, which if we're going to provide a conditional use permit, I would like to see it look more coherent as a single unit. And so that's an opinion that I have. And when I look at the drawings provided, especially on page 22, number 1, those don't look like, I mean, there's similarities, but it would be similar if it was all brick. And then you had the top to look like the neighbor's property, to the next property over, it would look like one property. But unfortunately, the way it lays out to me, it looks like 2 separate properties, which makes me lean to saying in its current layout and its current design, this doesn't make sense to provide a conditional use permit for.
Mr. Marilyn Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to go back and raise the question I raised a moment ago, and that is the visual coherence, and remind the commission that, like with all conditional use permits, we're going to ask to vote on 8 different elements, and number 3 addresses directly the visual coherence. And this proposal, as presented, that garage in my mind is a distinctly different and dissimilar structure.
Thank you, Mr. Marilyn Smith. Ms. Lowell, do we have any public comments, or has anyone signed up to speak on this topic?
No, we've received none.
Thank you. Further question or discussion? Mr. White.
So this detached garage will have full utilities, electricity, water?
Just electricity at this point.
Just electricity.
Ms. Munsell.
Thank you, Chairman Sema. I'm still, I guess, stuck on that it could be attached. I mean, I realize I'm in the minority, but I don't know. I mean, they're not allowed, so I don't see a compelling, it's not impossible to attach it. So I guess that's my sticking point. But I don't know. I don't know where that leaves me, but.
Mr. Spencer.
Is the question of the applicant, are they amenable to a masonry material that will match the house? And that could be a condition of approval, move this forward?
Can you say that again, Brian, please?
Are the applicants amenable to a masonry type material that is similar to the house? It can be made a condition of approval in order for this item to potentially move forward with a positive recommendation to the Board of Aldermen.
I believe we would have to discuss that with them further, but I think that potentially incorporating, masonry into the structure is something we can explore with them as a way to kind of acknowledge the board's comments to tie the two together aesthetically and to incorporate that, a brick material. I don't know if it's the whole structure or if it's a band that we can strike, horizontal datum, but certainly trying to, speak to the board's comments is something that we're open to exploring.
Mr. Bolzino?
Yeah, I would not be disposed to making a condition to approval without seeing how it would actually lay out. So I don't think we can go that direction to just make it a condition. I think without seeing how it all fits together would be very important.
Mr. White?
Well, another aspect of this is that we are looking at a barn type structure. The flat with a A-frame roof, which simply doesn't match the existing building. The existing house is, as I said earlier, is delightful. Part of that delight is not only the brick, it's the breaks in the roof. The roofs have got separate roofs there, they have breaks in them. This is just a barn sitting next to the house. Putting bricks might alleviate some of that look, but certainly not entirely. I think the structure itself is open to question as to whether it melds in to the existing building. It's an unfortunate thing because I fully realize that we do have restraints in it that in terms of access can only be from the north and from the west because of the restrictions of not being visible to Mason Ridge and to Clayton. It's unfortunate, but I don't think this structure as it stands now answers the questions.
Mr. White? Well, Ryan, I think you were trying to propose a way forward. I mean, one option is we can, I can call a question and we can vote, or Mr. Bemberg, if you would like to discuss this with your client, and we could, I guess, potentially continue this and give you an opportunity to sharpen your pencil. What would you prefer?
I think if we can vote on it, I think that it sounds like there were some comments, related to, or a majority of the comments are related to the character of the structure. And I guess from my standpoint, just to voice some, just to better clarify the process of, so it sounds like from what you're saying, Ryan, that, in terms of what comes before what, if the architectural review board, which from my understanding has the purview over style, material, size and shape, that doesn't really, that kind of exists in a separate silo to the planning and zoning comments, which also do have purview over style and shape and material and color. Is that right?
I'm kind of at a loss because if we redesign it the way P&Z and Board of Aldermen would like, then I send it back to ARB. What if ARB doesn't like it? Then you're in this.
Exactly. That's where I'm a
this
little
endless
confused about process.
loop. But I prefer that we just move forward through P&Z and Board of Aldermen. The representative of ARB is on the Board of Aldermen, the chairperson. But I think the board is giving you a clear signal that you should consider a material change and bring that back at the next meeting, because a negative vote is a supermajority of Board of Aldermen, which is very difficult, if not impossible, to achieve. So I think a continuance is the proper path forward to give time for reconsideration of architecture. Or if you can attach it, then you wouldn't need a CUP. And I would just say go back to ARB and have that blessed.
Mr. Bolzino?
Yeah, just to try to clarify some of the process. You can ask for a vote, which you did, but I want you to be careful with what you ask for. So if you ask for a vote and it comes out of this commission with a negative recommendation, then you will need a supermajority to get an approval at the Board of Aldermen. If you allow this to be tabled and come back with a design that this commission believes is coherent, then it could come out with a positive recommendation and you'd only need a simple majority at the Board of Aldermen level. So you can play poker any way you want to. We're not telling you what to do. You can certainly ask for a vote and we will vote on it. Or it's within your power to ask for a continuance. So it's in your hands.
Yeah, I agree that it seems to make the most sense at this stage to ask for that continuance and let us sharpen our pencils, as you said, and we'll discuss with our client the best path forward, whether it is attaching it and going back in front of the Architecture Review Board, or if we are to keep it as a detached structure, what level of material and kind of detail refinement are we looking at in terms of cost and complexity to kind of make it more cohesive with the existing structure. So at this, to clarify that, we'll ask for, it sounds like asking for a continuance at this stage is the best path forward. So
I see Mr. Spencer nodding his head as well. So do I have a motion to continue this matter to, oh, go ahead, Mr. Bolzino.
Just before, and I guess I got a question for Ed. Will it actually force them to go back to ARB or not? I mean, I don't want to, obviously we don't want to make them incur another application fee or anything like that having to do with this process because they were somehow told to go to ARB first. And I don't want to have them incur any additional expense because of what we're doing now, just because we're a little bit out of order here. So I'm just wondering whether, I mean, they were required to go to ARB. They did go to ARB, and ARB makes recommendations. They don't approve anything. So my question is, do you think they need to go back to ARB? And you don't have to answer me if you don't want to.
Well, and I'll probably punt to Ryan, but because obviously this is always kind of the inherent kind of issue you run into. But, obviously, because it's a CUP, that runs on a separate track to any ARB approval process. So they're coming to you for the CUP, where it gets kind of, we've entered this gray territory is obviously the aesthetic element or condition of a conditional use permit. So, whilst it's not specifically in your purview, right, to review the aesthetics in discerning whether you think a CUP is appropriate, aesthetics are one of the things you look at. But in terms of what would trigger it to go back, Ryan, I guess I'd kick that to you. Is there a circumstance, I assume it's tied to a building permit application, and if they've gone through once, they're probably okay?
I don't believe they should have to go back simply because it's a recommendation from the ARB, just like it's a P&Z recommendation. We didn't require ARB review of these kind of structures until last year. I'm trying to save citizens time by putting it forward at the most convenient meeting. I thought that the unanimous vote of ARB would hold some water in this regard. Obviously, that's not the case. But I don't think it's fair or appropriate to send it back to ARB when it's a recommendation from them and ultimately Board of Aldermen to win as to what that final architecture is going to look like. So I would just think that a continuance and then a blessing of the architecture and the CUP body and then ultimately decision by the Board of Aldermen is appropriate.
Okay, I will make a motion to continue to the next available meeting.
Lowell, when is our next meeting?
February 16th.
Is that the meeting you want to continue to, Mr. Bolzina?
Yes.
All right, we're going to continue to our February 16th meeting, seconded by Mr. McKnight. Any further discussion? Ms. Lowell, will you call the roll?
Dr. O'Mell,
Aye.
Mr. McKnight,
Yes.
Mr. Malin Smith,
Yes.
Alderman Whitmire,
Yes.
Mr. White,
Aye.
Mr. Bolzina,
Yes, I think I have to say yes because I made the motion.
No.
Ms.
You don't.
Miller,
Yes.
Chairman Sema,
Yes.
Mayor Ream,
You were muted, Mary.
that was a yes.
Yep, that's a yes.
Thank you. And Ms. Munzel.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Benberg.
Thank you.
Moving back to agenda item number 1 under old business tonight, the zoning text amendment of regulations pertaining to oversight and management of tree studies, section 405.335, natural resource protection standards. This is continued from our December 15th, 2021 P&Z Commission meeting. Call for a presenter, Mr. Spencer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I discussed at our staff meeting, staff in concert with Alderman Whitmire have refined and simplified the language. We're using defined terms instead of having some extraneous wording, so it's more clear. I'm also utilizing using the existing resolution from last year, which basically empowers the city to directly charge expenses for third-party review, legal engineering, environmental review of permits. And that language has been looked at by Mr. Bolzina, has made some suggestions of edits. Is now found under subsection B2N. So we're basically falling back on our existing policy process of accruing an escrow, using it if there's more than we invoice for those expenses. And I think this is a good solution and will help to achieve what was originally intended, which is to make clear to developers that the city has the right and ability for third-party review of any tree study.
Mr. Spencer? Any questions or discussion? Mr. McKnight?
I would like to compliment the staff, Spencer, the work you did on trying to, go through all of our objections and all of our modifications to this. I just want to express my appreciation for the work you did on it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Bolzina?
Yeah, I guess I think this is the time for me to make a motion to incorporate
Nope.
changes.
We need to make a motion.
We need, okay, I will make a motion to approve this ordinance.
All right. You got a motion by Mr. Bolzini. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderman Whitmire. All right. Now, any discussion? or
Okay,
amendment?
I will make a motion to amend the language in accordance with a revised document that was prepared by staff, and that essentially modifies about 3 paragraphs simply. And just to give you a little bit of background, I'm getting an echo for some reason, and I don't know why. But the phrase approved by the city was not necessary because we don't want to be in the position of somehow second guessing whether a certified arborist or a licensed landscape architect is capable of performing the services necessary under this ordinance. So there was no need to have approved by the city, because then we are placed in a position of somehow judging whether somebody that's certified by the state or licensed by the state has the ability to do what we're requiring them to do under this ordinance. So that was taken off. The other is, there was the words rope or fence was to describe what you have to put up around the area to keep the trees from being disturbed. But later on in the same sentence, it tells you what it is, and that is a green mesh safety fence. So we don't have to say rope or fence, because we've already described it as a green mesh safety fence. So again, it's just a matter of being efficient, not using any language that is unnecessary. And there was a couple places where that approved by city was, and then there was just one word that was deleted about should. But anyway, the way it was revised by staff and reviewed by Alderman Whitmire, that's the language we came up with to amend this, and I make that motion to make those changes.
Okay, do I have a second? Seconded by Mr. White. Mr. McKnight.
Mr. Chairman, I guess just a point of order. I'm trying to figure out whether, I guess either way would work, but I just want to have Ed's opinion on this. Would this be a point where you would say do a substitution of the bill that was created, or do the changes that are here? Because I'm looking at this bill that was sent an email, and the clarification, I guess, would be the areas highlighted in yellow would be the changes that Commissioner Bolazina recommended for these. Is that correct?
Correct. Yeah.
So I guess you could do it either way, but I just want to make sure, Ed, that's,
Yeah.
we're making multiple changes in one request here, and would a substitution work better here, or what would be the right way to do this?
I think because we're not before the Board of Aldermen, I don't know we would necessarily, I don't know it's the right way to do it as a substitution. That's normally what we would do if there'd been a first reading to get a bill before the board and then to introduce a revised bill. I think here, because of the way in which that exhibit is prepared, it makes clear what your recommendations would be in terms of what was originally proposed and then what you're recommending to the board in terms of the changes. So I think my preference or my suggestion would be to just, as in the manner that Commissioner Bolazina has moved to, incorporate those changes in the recommendation.
Okay, I see nothing objectionable about what was changed then, so that's good.
Further discussion or questions about the amendment? Mr. Malin-Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have two questions that I would like to ask, just for, if you would, clarification. The first, I guess I need to direct to Ed. Ed, as I recall, when this matter first came before this commission, the proposal was for the city staff to retain the architecture review of the trees. And I believe that approach was rejected because it was judged to be an overstep of the city's authority. Is that an accurate understanding of what led us to this approach?
I kind of wasn't really intimately involved at that stage. I think in terms of, to the extent that legal counsel involved, I think Steve may have had some conversations with those on the committee, but Ryan, I'll defer to you if that's okay, because I wasn't involved in those conversations.
Well, you're out of the country.
Yeah, sorry, I was back in England.
Yeah, it was. Steve did not, Mr. Garrett, our city attorney, did not like the language that basically put the responsibility upon us, and it seemed to insert us too much into process. That's why we're falling back on existing language about, we have an escrow that's assigned to a permit. That escrow we can use for third-party review, and we can bill directly expenses if it goes above that escrow. Everybody who signs that application, fills out that application, it's expressly stated on those applications. So when they go for a demo to tear down trees or a house or something like that, or a site improvement plan, they're signing up and they accept the responsibility that, you know, we may incur third-party expenses for review. So I don't know if that answers your question, but
Is it accurate to say it's not much different than if we insist on a second traffic study?
correct. Yeah.
Okay, all right, I understand that principle. So let me then ask my next and last question. It's my impression that the landscape architect community in this region is a pretty small one, that there's a limited number of professionals in that arena that provide that service. So I ask you, Ryan, as a member of the staff, and it's a judgment question, but is it practical for you, should there be a question about the initial assessment, to then engage another member of that small community to, in essence, question the judgment or assessment of one of their fellow professionals? And does that create an untenable situation for the city or the staff? And I'm just wanting to make sure that I think this through to implementation before we enact it. I'm inclined to vote for this myself. I believe that this is a significant area, and what's proposed is an improvement over what we're doing today. But I just would appreciate your perspective on the practicality.
You're absolutely correct. It is a small group. But I would also offer traffic studies are performed by an even smaller group, extremely limited.
Right.
And engineering services as well. Surprised. I mean, we're talking about a half dozen companies that regularly do work in town that we can pull from. So it's not a problem we already haven't had to address. We've been doing it for some time. I can't recall any issues. I'm comfortable with it. Laura, I don't know if you have any more perspective with Craig and Tim and the engineering side of things, if they've had issues, because they've used engineering third party in the past. But I think we can find if the situation arose, a third party where it wouldn't be an issue.
Okay.
Mr. Sluice?
Again, I appreciate that perspective. I just wanted to turn that rock over now versus later.
Mr. Sluice?
Yeah, I was just going to add from my perspective, peer review is pretty common, even in the, but traffic studies is a great example. I think there really are only kind of 2 or 3 entities that do it. And a lot of the time it's, they're used to reviewing the other one or the other one's work. I've seen it not just at the kind of the planning or the city level, but even in litigation, they're pretty used to reviewing what the other company or companies have done. So it's kind of a naturally awkward thing that they're used to doing and do frequently.
Thank you.
Mr. Bolzina?
Yeah, just a little bit of history. The main point of contention that has come up in the past, not that it could be the only one, but it's when you look at a tree and you are describing its condition. And is it poor? Is it healthy? Is it whatever it is? We have we have the various criteria in the ordinance. So the city is not limited to landscape architects. Matter of fact, most of the developers will engage an arborist because I think arborists may be cheaper than landscape architects. I don't know, but so we're not necessarily limited to the landscape architect community. The kinds of disagreements that we have can be addressed mostly, I believe, by a certified arborist, and there's probably more of those than there are landscape architects in the city. So I don't have any great fear. And as Ed said, peer review, even if it is a small community, is a pretty common thing, and nobody gets their feathers too ruffled over having somebody make comments on their work. Or if they do, they shouldn't.
We've got an amendment on the table by Mr. Bolzina. Any further discussion on that amendment? All right, all in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion appears to carry unanimously. All right, we have an amended motion. Further discussion on item number 1. Ms. Lowell, have we received any public comments? Are there any members of the public who signed up to speak?
No, we've received none.
Wow.
The public hearing would be at the Board of Aldermen.
All right, Ms. Lowell, will you call the roll?
Alderman Whitmore,
Aye.
Mr. McKnight,
Yes.
Ms. Munzel,
Aye.
Chairman Sema,
Aye.
Dr. O'Mell,
Aye.
Mr. Malin Smith,
Yes.
Mayor Ream,
Yes.
Mr. Bolazina,
Yes.
Ms. Miller,
Yes.
and Mr. White.
Aye.
The motion carries unanimously.
Okay. Under other business, item 6 tonight, the residential gate zoning amendments. We had asked Mr. Spencer to bring this back to us after the new year, and here we are. We had talked last year about having putting together a subcommittee to review aspects of this, if I'm correct.
Right, after we had several residential gates last year that, the issue of distance from the street, and we've solved that, but there were also issues about that I think Alderman Whitmire had mentioned maybe we should have further review of in terms of aesthetics and placement and other aspects.
Mhm.
So this subcommittee could investigate our current regs and see if there's some language we need to tighten up or adjust.
Alderman Whitmire?
And I would say that it was simply a suggestion on my part, having witnessed conversation around the gates. And if it's something that this commission chooses not to move forward with, certainly understand. A specific example, it seemed like there were some unwritten guidelines that we were trying to follow that weren't in the code, that maybe the code needs to be improved to include. For instance, the opacity of the way it's built, the structure of the gate itself, and so forth.
So this committee would work with you, Ryan, to come back to us with some updated language?
Correct.
Okay, and we'd be looking for what, 2 or 3 people?
That 3 at the most. Yes.
Okay, do I have any volunteers that would like to take this item up? Mr. Malin Smith, thank you. Anyone like to join Mr. Malin Smith? Mr. White? Okay, and anyone else? Otherwise, we've got 2. I think that'll do it. All right, thank you, gentlemen.
Can we consider Ryan to be the chair?
Yes, of course.
All right. Laura, your vice chair.
I do not accept.
Ryan, with the chair comes 3 votes, so you're in.
Oh, thank you.
Correct. Alderman Whitmire, do you have a report from the Board of Aldermen on action by the board?
Yes, and if I could slip it in here, I would also like to thank the staff for their work on the tree code that we just went through a few moments ago. Really appreciate that. So report from the board. Only one thing to report. The ordinance regarding portable storage units and dumpsters was approved unanimously by the Board of Aldermen in the January meeting a week or so ago.
Excellent.
That's it.
Okay, short and sweet.
Move to adjourn.
Got a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Mr. McKnight. All in favor, say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion appears to carry unanimously.
I have one question now that we have that container ordinance. On Mason Ridge, there's a guy that has a construction trailer. I think he's using it instead of a trash can. So that thing's been there for probably a year. So I don't know if that fits that bill or not, or
If it's under a permit, it'd be different. If it's under a building permit.
But I mean, how long does he have to build the house? I can't.
A year.
We'll look into
Apparently a
it.
year.
That's right. That's right.
Okay.
All right. We'll see you next month, everyone.